The journey to Uganda's independence was a slow and steady one. It did not happen overnight. The desire for self-rule began to grow in the hearts of Ugandans around the 1940s. This was a time when many African nations were starting to question colonial power. The Second World War had just ended. African soldiers had fought for European powers. They returned with new ideas about freedom and self-determination. These ideas started to spread across the continent, reaching Uganda. People began to talk more openly about having a say in how their country was run. They saw other nations moving towards independence. This inspired them to think about their own future. A significant step occurred in 1945. For the first time, African representatives were appointed to the Legislative Council, known as the LegCo. This council was the body that made laws for Uganda under British rule. The three men chosen were Michael Ernest Kawalya Kagwa, Petero Nyangabyaki, and Yekonia Zirabamuzali. Their presence in the LegCo was a small but important change. It meant that African voices could now be heard, even if just a little, in the colonial government. This was a symbolic victory. It showed that the British were starting to acknowledge the need for African participation in governance, even if the real power still rested firmly in their hands. During this same period, various movements began to emerge. These groups were focused on protecting the rights of the local people. One such movement was the Batakabu. This group was led by a man named Ignatius Kangave Musazi. The Batakabu movement was particularly strong in the Buganda kingdom. They fought against policies that they felt suppressed indigenous Ugandans. They advocated for better treatment and more rights for Africans. Their actions helped to raise political awareness among the ordinary people. They showed that it was possible to challenge the colonial authorities and demand a fairer system for everyone living in Uganda. These early stirrings were crucial. They laid the groundwork for the more organized political action that would follow in the 1950s. The experiences of these early leaders and movements taught valuable lessons. They showed the importance of unity and persistence. The desire for self-governance was growing stronger each year. The ideas of freedom were taking root. While full independence was still nearly 2 decades away, these initial efforts were the first steps on a long road. They marked the beginning of a new chapter in Uganda's history, a chapter that would eventually lead to the birth of a new nation. The early 1950s saw a new phase in Uganda's journey towards independence. This was the era when formal political parties began to take shape. These parties provided a more organized way for Ugandans to voice their demands for self-rule. In 1952, the Ugandan National Congress, or UNC, was formed. Ignatius Musazi, who had earlier led the Batakabu movement, was a key figure in its establishment. The UNC was the first nationwide political party in Uganda. Its main goal was to achieve independence from British colonial rule. It aimed to unite people from different regions and ethnic groups under a common banner of freedom and self-determination for all. The formation of the UNC was a significant development. It showed that the political consciousness in Uganda was maturing. People were no longer just expressing discontent through smaller, often localized movements. They were now creating structured organizations with clear political agendas. The UNC began to campaign for greater African representation in government. They called for an end to colonial policies that disadvantaged Ugandans. Their message resonated with many people who were tired of being ruled by a foreign power. The party started to build a base of support across the country, laying the foundation for future political struggles and eventual success. Following the establishment of the UNC, another important political party emerged. In 1954, the Democratic Party, or DP, was founded. The DP often drew its support from the Catholic community in Uganda. It also advocated for independence and a democratic system of government. The emergence of multiple parties indicated a growing political dynamism within the protectorate. It meant that different groups and ideologies were finding expression. While both the UNC and DP aimed for independence, they sometimes had different ideas about how to achieve it and what post-independence Uganda should look like. This created a landscape of political debate and competition that was new to the country. A pivotal moment in this period was the Namirembe Agreement of 1955. This agreement was reached after a period of tension, particularly concerning the Kabaka, or king of Buganda, who had been exiled by the British governor. The agreement resolved the crisis and allowed for the Kabaka's return. Importantly, the Namirembe Agreement also included a significant declaration. It stated that Uganda would move towards independence and that this would happen within a foreseeable time frame. Specifically, it hinted that independence could be achieved after about 6 years. This was a major breakthrough, providing a clearer, albeit still approximate, timeline for the end of colonial rule and the birth of a sovereign Ugandan nation. After the Namirembe Agreement of 1955, the momentum towards self-governance in Uganda continued to build steadily. The British colonial administration began to accept that independence was an inevitable outcome. The focus shifted towards preparing the country for this transition. One of the key areas of development was the Legislative Council, or LegCo. In 1958, a significant reform took place. The LegCo was expanded to include 60 members. This expansion was important because it increased the number of Africans who could participate in the legislative process. It provided a more representative platform for discussing the future of Uganda, even though ultimate authority still rested with the British governor. This expansion of the LegCo was a step towards greater internal self-government. It allowed more Ugandan voices to be heard in the corridors of power. Aspiring politicians gained valuable experience in parliamentary procedures and debate. The discussions within the LegCo became more focused on the path to independence. Issues such as the type of constitution Uganda should adopt, the relationship between the central government and the traditional kingdoms, and the economic future of the country were debated. This period was crucial for shaping the political landscape and for training the leaders who would soon take over the reins of government. The progress continued, and in March 1961, Uganda achieved a major milestone: internal self-governance. This meant that Ugandans took over most of the ministerial positions in the government. Benedicto Kiwanuka, the leader of the Democratic Party, became the first chief minister of Uganda. His party had won the elections held earlier that year. This was a significant transfer of responsibility. For the first time, Ugandans were largely in charge of their own internal affairs. The British governor still retained control over certain areas like defense and foreign affairs, but the day-to-day running of the country was now in Ugandan hands. The period of internal self-governance under Benedicto Kiwanuka was relatively short, lasting just over a year. However, it was a critical learning period. It provided a practical test for the country's emerging political institutions and leaders. It also set the stage for the final steps towards full independence. The political parties continued to campaign and prepare for the next general elections, which would determine who would lead Uganda into full sovereignty. The atmosphere was one of anticipation and hope, as the long-awaited dream of independence was now very close to becoming a reality for all Ugandans. The year 1962 was pivotal for Uganda, marking the final stretch on its road to complete independence. A crucial event in this journey was the general election held in April. This election was particularly significant because it would determine which political party and which leader would have the honor of guiding Uganda into nationhood. The political atmosphere was charged with excitement and anticipation. The main contenders were the Uganda People's Congress, or UPC, led by Milton Obote, and the Democratic Party, or DP, led by the incumbent Chief Minister Benedicto Kiwanuka. Another influential group was Kabaka Yeka, a Buganda monarchist party, meaning king only. The election campaign was hard-fought, with parties holding rallies across the country, trying to win the support of the electorate. The UPC, under Milton Obote, managed to form a strategic alliance with Kabaka Yeka. This alliance was crucial because Buganda was a powerful and populous kingdom, and KY held significant sway there. The DP, despite being in power during the period of internal self-governance, faced a tough challenge from this combined force. The results of the April 1962 elections saw the UPC emerge as the largest party, though it did not win an outright majority on its own. Following the election results, the Uganda People's Congress, thanks to its alliance with Kabaka Yeka, was able to form a coalition government. Milton Obote, as the leader of the UPC, became the Prime Minister-elect. This outcome set the stage for the formal transfer of power later that year. The elections were generally considered to be peaceful and orderly, which was a positive sign for the country's future democratic development. The people of Uganda had spoken, and they had chosen the leadership that would take them across the threshold of independence. It was a moment of great hope and expectation. The formation of the UPC-KY coalition government under Milton Obote was a practical political arrangement. It brought together nationalist aspirations represented by the UPC and traditional interests represented by KY. This coalition was seen by many as a way to ensure national unity as Uganda embarked on its journey as an independent nation. The focus now shifted to the final preparations for Independence Day, scheduled for October 9, 1962. The newly elected government began the work of preparing for sovereignty, including finalizing the constitution and making arrangements for the historic celebrations that would mark the end of British colonial rule. Section 5. A New Dawn, Independence Day, October 9, 1962. October 9, 1962 remains the most significant date in Uganda's history. It was the day the nation was born. On this day, Uganda officially gained its independence from British colonial rule, which had lasted for nearly 70 years. The atmosphere across the country, and particularly in the capital city Kampala, was electric with joy and celebration. Years of political struggle, negotiation and preparation had finally culminated in this historic moment. Ugandans from all walks of life gathered to witness the birth of their new nation, filled with hope for a brighter future, free from foreign domination. The main independence ceremony took place at Kololo Independence Grounds in Kampala. It was a grand and solemn occasion. The Duke of Kent, Prince Edward, represented Queen Elizabeth II of Great Britain. He was tasked with formally handing over the instruments of power to the new Ugandan leadership. This symbolic act signified the end of British authority and the beginning of Ugandan sovereignty. Thousands of people, including local citizens, foreign dignitaries, and representatives from other newly independent African nations, were present to witness this historic handover. The anticipation was palpable as the moment approached. As midnight struck on October 8th, transitioning into October 9th, a powerful symbolic act took place. The British Union Jack, the flag of the colonial power, was ceremoniously lowered for the last time. In its place, the new vibrant Ugandan flag with its black, yellow and red stripes and the crested crane at its center was hoisted high into the night sky. This moment was met with a thunderous roar of cheers and applause from the assembled crowds. It was a deeply emotional experience for many Ugandans, signifying the end of an era and the dawn of a new one. The new national anthem, O Uganda, Land of Beauty, was sung with immense pride. The formal transfer of power happened later that day. The Duke of Kent handed over the constitutional instruments to Apollo Milton Obote, who became Uganda's first Prime Minister. This act officially marked Uganda as an independent and sovereign state within the Commonwealth of Nations. The celebrations continued throughout the day and into the night with parades, traditional music, dancing and feasts. It was a time of immense national pride and unity. Ugandans looked forward to charting their own course, making their own decisions, and building a prosperous nation for themselves and future generations. The journey had been long, but freedom had finally arrived. Section 6, the first steps, Uganda's inaugural government. With independence achieved on October 9, 1962, the immediate task was to establish and run the first government of the new nation. Apollo Milton Obote, leader of the Uganda People's Congress, assumed the crucial role of Prime Minister. He headed a coalition government formed by the UPC and the Kabaka Yeka Party, an alliance forged before the April 1962 elections. This coalition was seen as a pragmatic approach to unite